Alright guys, if you've been watching my channel for more than a minute, you've probably heard of this game, The First Descendant, and all the controversies around it, going back to November of last year with this article saying The First Descendant announces plans to add jiggle physics, prompting outrage from critics. It's about what you'd expect, people who hate attractive characters in video games. Now, the one thing I'll be honest about and say about The First Descendant is this is not a game that appeals to me. I have no problem with the attractive characters. I do not believe the game is a quote-unquote gooner game, like it's been labeled over this whole Goonergate debacle between the right-wing puritanical side of Gamergate 2, or the anti-woke side of things, and people who are like, I just want attractive characters, and I don't think that this is, adult explicit material, rightfully so. That being said, this game has been at the center of controversies. For me personally, the game just isn't that good. Which is why the player numbers have plummeted, despite the fact that they keep adding things like this into the game. You see these hot tub skins that they've added, these hot spring skins. This is very much akin to back in the day with things like Dead or Alive, where they tried to use, sensual female forms and attractive characters in skimpy outfits to get you to play the game. And to some degree, it will have a positive effect on the player numbers, but only for a limited amount of time, only for a set amount of time, because the reality is, most people, after they get their kind of, their fix from new skins, new cosmetics, and it's not just because it's, female characters in skimpy bikinis. Every game has this. Those shiny keys that they jangle, the cosmetics, all those features, only will pull you back in for so long before you realize the game is just not that good. And that's the problem I ran into with First Descendant playing it. It just wasn't as good as Warframe. I didn't care how good looking the characters were, right? Which is why the First Descendant only has 7,000 players playing it right now, after a peak of more than 250,000 people 7 months ago. Well, we're seeing similar criticisms of games like Marvel Rivals. I'm going to make sure I mute this, because this game features a lot of the same type of characters as First Descendant. Maybe you could say it doesn't feature or like focus on the gooner bait, quote unquote, parts of the game, but all the characters are attractive, they're good looking, they're all caked up, they all have really, feminine features for the women, masculine features for the men. But the reality is it is a far superior game to The First Descendant, which is why you still see a massively steady player base for this game, as opposed to First Descendant. On top of that, there's been a lot of controversy recently. We'll just kind of go through that real quick. Apparently, the Chinese company Netease that owns Marvel Rivals decided to lay off a whole development team here in Seattle. And it was a big thing a couple days ago. Apparently, everyone was freaking out because they thought the entire development team was laid off when it was just this one isolated team in Seattle. But now we're seeing reports today, and take this with a grain of salt, that the reason the Seattle team was laid off by NetEase, again a Chinese company, was that they were lazy, entitled, slow, and woke. Now, this is coming from Grumps, so I say again, take that with a heavy grain of salt, because again, I don't know if this is legitimate or if this is just rumor and speculation, but apparently somebody talked to Grumps and said that there was a massive problem with this climate over here in the West where they're just sick and tired of these lazy woke developers. Now again, I could see this being a realistic thing because let's be honest, this is something we've seen in the AAA video game industry for a long time now, which is why we're seeing so much success for games coming out of China and Japan and Korea, because of the fact that they're not afraid to give you both a competent game and fan service as well as attractive characters. This brings us to Mecha Break, which is a game that I tried the beta of, I think it was about 6 months ago it came out, and this is the game that's supposed to be releasing, I believe, this year, this summer, if I'm not mistaken, so we should only be a few months away. But unfortunately for Mecha Break, despite its player numbers, things are not going exceptionally well for this game. Now, this is once again a game that, despite the fact that it is a mech game, it leans heavily into the fan service, as you will. Now again, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but the reality is I'm worried that this has become a trend where instead of giving you a fully fleshed out, competent, enjoyable experience, they're giving you the, decent aspects of a good game, even if they're not, highly conceptualized and given like the absolute best experience they can, but instead they're giving you, well, here's some cake, here's some cheesecake, here's some attractive women. So even if the game isn't that great, there you have it. Now, the surprising thing about this game, though, this demo that's out, that's not even the full game yet, is it hit a 300,000 concurrent player peak, which is crazy, because when I saw this a couple days ago when it first released, it only was around 3,000 concurrent players. Well, over the weekend, it jumped up massively. You can see these numbers. It hit a 24-hour concurrent peak of 317,000 people, and as I refresh this, currently we have 192,000 people playing this on a Sunday night. So again, pretty impressive, but the problem is This right here, if you see this review score, 33%. When I was looking at this earlier today, it was at 25%. It was that low. Compare that to Marvel Rivals, who right now has about 268,000 people playing it with an 80% on 226,000 reviews. This is a shockingly massive difference between Marvel Rivals and, of course, Mecha Break. And I talked about this on Twitter. I said the Mecha Break demo just dropped this weekend. Numbers are insane. It hit a peak of over 300,000 players, while games like Avowed failed to reach 20K. And that's a whole nother topic we'll talk about tomorrow on the live stream. But again, the more interesting thing, again, is that there was a 25% score after 2,000 reviews this morning. The game is heavily criticized for predatory monetization, which is something we've seen coming out of companies like Netease and Tencent. Definitely games that are more out of Korea and China that are way more predatory with their monetization practices, obviously with the microtransactions, in-game transactions. And of course, using anti-cheat spyware while trying to hide bad gameplay behind fan service and jiggle physics. You can see all these low scores, all these not recommended scores here. Uses kernel-level anti-cheat expert, requires manual removal after the game is installed. Apparently, the anti-cheat has to be removed separately from the game. For a game about piloting huge tons of steel with equally massive jets, the movement feels extremely sluggish. And this is another thing I've seen from people saying they played the beta and it was fantastic, but the demo, for whatever reason, feels like it's been slowed down. Then you have people saying the character creator, you can pick how big, how perky, and how far apart your boobs are, how big, how perky, and how far apart your butt cheeks are. There's a separate slider for thigh thickness and width. The combat, press L mouse button to shoot, press R mouse button to melee dash. There's a weird pause between every input. There is absolutely no illusion about what this game wants to be and who the target audience is. If you like boobarellas, then this is your game. If you like mecha combat, I'd suggest something else. And that's, I think, right there is what I was talking about. It's okay to give the fan service and the attractive characters. The problem is if you're only giving that and you're not giving a fully thought out and well-conceptualized experience, you're not going to have a lasting fan base. If you like large female jiggling proportions and showering scenes, then this game is just made for you. Gameplay is too simple and tutorials painfully long. It auto-locks your aim on an enemy and all you have to do is hold left mouse button. You can tell it's aimed for Asian Gooner audience to make as much money as possible. And again, I don't think it's necessarily has to be considered Gooner bait just because it has attractive women, but I do understand that they lean heavily into the eye candy, and it seems like the gameplay itself is lacking. I said this is extremely reminiscent of the first Descendant, a game which saw a massive 24-hour peak of 264,000 players, but failed to retain most of its player base. Fan service and beautiful characters can only carry a bad game so far. And again, another thing to be concerned about talking about this anti-cheat and spyware is that this is a game from Tencent, who has a minority stake of about 10% in Season Games, which is the developer behind Mecha Break. So even if you don't care about the gameplay, even if you don't care about the jiggle, positive or negative, if you say I could take it or leave it, it doesn't bother me one way or the other. The game seems to be setting itself up to be another first Descendant. And it's unfortunate because I did play the beta and it seemed like it could be a fun game. But if you just go down to the mostly negative reviews and you just scroll through these, a lot of these all have similar things to complain about. It's not just saying, I don't want hot women, I don't like Gooner bait games. You'll see a few of those. People who are just complaining about the fact that the customization of the characters is so extreme that it's like, okay, there's literally more time spent creating characters and playing with the butt slider than there is actually in combat. But it just seems that this game doesn't have the gameplay to back up everything that they've been trying to make it do. So I'm going to leave it right there, guys. In the meantime, if you guys need some game keys, check out Instant Gaming for discounts on a whole bunch of upcoming and current titles. All the platforms are available on there. Let me know what you guys think about all this stuff with Mecha Break down in the comments down below, and I will catch you guys on the next one. All right, and if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you for being here. I do have two channels, Minimal Effort Podcast, as well as my gaming channel. I do have a Twitch and Kick for my gaming channel. We do live streams over there occasionally, maybe once a week. And then if you are in the market for a new PC, make sure to check out Meta PCs. Click the link I have down below. Use code TBO at checkout for a special discount. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.